Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
The mood had been pretty grim when they left Dryden hours ago. The 300-mile trip had started a month earlier when Sylvia, Simon's girlfriend, noticed a suspicious spot on the back of Simon's ear. After some convincing, she got him to see Doc Eller, who ended up cutting off a piece of Simon's ear and sending it to a friend in Lubbock. Skin cancer had claimed Simon's father, and like many of the old cowboys, Simon had bits of his ears and nose missing from sun damage. He was scared. Sean was pretty sure Simon was more likely to get an ulcer from all his worrying than actually have cancer. As for the trip to Lubbock, Sean wasn't even supposed to be there. But when Sylvia's mother fell in San Antonio, she asked him to come for moral support. Truthfully, Sean was worried too, but Sylvia had made it clear that he was to be the rock she would have been if she had been there. Despite his unease around doctors and hospitals, his job was to offer support, listen, and keep Simon out of trouble along the Slayton Highway. When the nurse called Simon back to the exam room, he asked Sean to come with him. Sean didn't mention that Sylvia had threatened him if he didn't make sure Simon asked the list of questions she'd prepared. Dr. Marks, who had gone to med school with Doc Eller and now taught at the University Hospital in Lubbock, would have the answers before they even left. The doctor spent a bit too much time telling war stories about his and Doc Eller's time in med school. But nothing surprised Simon and Sean. Doc Eller had always been that kind of character. When the doctor finally told Simon it wasn't cancer, both of them were visibly relieved. The doctor didn't waste the chance to preach about the dangers of sunburns and the importance of sunscreen. Sean, who preferred wearing a hat, long sleeves, and a bandana, made the mistake of offering his opinion. The doctor wasn't impressed, and Sean ended up being the one who got lectured. He spent more time being reprimanded than Simon did. When they finally left, Simon was grinning and laughing at Sean, who felt like he should buy the doctor a ring. The last time someone had given him that much grief, it was his ex-wife. But when they reached the hospital doors, they stepped out into one of Lubbock's notorious air quality crisis days. A strong wind of 35 or 40 miles per hour was kicking up dust, turning the sky a strange red. The air had a smell Sean couldn't quite describe. Say what you will about Dryden, it was small, desolate, and likely to stay that way, but at least the wind didn't blot out the sun. Lubbock, in the middle of cotton fields, was always going to be that way. No matter how many people they packed in, it would always be surrounded by fields of cotton, and spring would always come with a dusty haze. They managed to hold their hats down while they walked back to the truck as fast as they could. Simon called Sylvia on his cell phone to give her the news. Sean was still pissed at the doctor for his little lecture, and now, with his stomach growling and knowing that Simon's conversations with Sylvia tended to run on the long side, Sean was getting ready for a long wait when Simon handed him the cell phone. "What did the doctor tell you, Sean?" Sylvia quipped. Sean hadn't heard Simon tell about his little visit with the doctor, so he knew something was up. It was at that point that Sylvia informed him that she had set him up with the good doctor. If nothing else, Sylvia and Simon were a perfect match when it came to their proclivity toward meddling and practical jokes. Simon had been known to spend weeks, even months, setting up a joke, and Sean was learning that Sylvia didn't mind going that extra mile either. Turns out she had known the good doctor when she was studying nursing in San Antonio, and as she had been unable to convince Sean as to the wonders of sunscreen, she thought maybe he'd listen to a doctor. "It's good to know she doesn't mind nagging both of us," Sean said, glaring at Simon. What snappy comeback did Simon have? "Well, you need somebody to look after you." His comment reminded Sean of the recent efforts at matchmaking the two of them had been up to. The area around Dryden and Sanderson was not exactly overflowing with single women, though now and then there was the occasional new teacher right out of college. Generally speaking, the complete absence of a social scene usually kept their stay to 1 year. A few of the less hardy souls didn't even make it through the school year. The most eligible bachelorette in town was Samantha Miller. She worked as a waitress at the cafe in Sanderson. Actually, she owned the cafe. Sam, as she was known to her friends, had grown up at the Pecos gas plant. It was the furthest point on the bus route for the Sanderson School District and right across the road from the turnoff to the Miles Ranch. Over the years during the long hours on the bus, Sam and Sean had become fast friends. But friendship was as far as either had ever wanted their relationship to go. As far as Sean was concerned, she was the little sister he never had. Simon had been talking to Sylvia all this time, and when Sean stopped daydreaming, there was a frown on his face. At some point in time, the conversation had turned serious. Simon took off his hat and threw it in the seat, got out of the truck, and walked a little ways off for some privacy. Just to get out of the truck to talk meant that something was bad wrong, since no one in their right mind wanted to breathe the brown, gritty dirt blowing around. The longer they talked, the more morose Simon got, and they talked for a good little bit. Simon had lost the smile the doctor had given him. In fact, he looked worse than when he was worried about having cancer. He and Sylvia said their goodbyes and love yous, then he closed the phone. After Simon got back into the truck spit and mud balls, his eyes were red and watery, and Sean was pretty sure it wasn't all caused by the dirt. He'd never seen Simon tear up, but ever since he met Sylvia, he had been a different person in many other ways. Still, he didn't say a word about what was going on, and Sean respected his longtime friend enough not to try to pry it out of him. They had the normal discussion as to where they should eat. After deciding the when and where, they left to go eat, and then start on the long trip back, heading off to some chain eatery that Simon knew of. He was quieter than normal, and Sean wondered what was eating on him. There was something wrong. Maybe he'd tell him while they were eating. They'd never kept secrets from each other before. A blonde-haired young lady greeted them and led them to a booth. The Mexico-flavored restaurant had sombreros, serapes, and matadors in velvet paintings hanging from floor to rafter intermixed with piñatas and Tecate signs. Every so many feet some fake plant was making a home for dust bunnies and cobwebs. It looked like every curio shop and border gas station had been stripped of their faded wares to decorate the place. No matter how you looked at this place, it was a far cry from Ma Crosby's, the famous bar across the river from Del Rio, Texas, in Ciudad Acuna. But by all accounts they put out a fair steak, and according to Simon their beer was cold. So here they sat shooting bull and taking refuge from Lubbock's brown fog. Simon sat silently sipping his beer, and that was not like him. Simon Wells and Sean were best friends. Neither had any siblings, so they had basically adopted each other as brothers. They had spent almost every waking minute with each other since they had met 25 years ago. Something else was eating on Simon. You'd have thought the news from the doctor would have had him in a great mood. The waitress came and went, and Sean watched Simon till he had to say something. "What's wrong, Simon?" Simon started telling Sean that Sylvia's mother was in bad shape. She had fallen, and along with a broken hip, she'd had a stroke. Seems that Sylvia's sister, who lived a few blocks away, hadn't checked on her, and she had lain on the floor for a day and a half. Sylvia would be staying in San Antonio until her mother recovered, and for now that looked like it would be many months. Sylvia Guerra was one of those people that gave unconditionally and expected everyone else to do the same. Simon was pretty much the same way, making them a perfect match. So in the normal course of things, Sylvia and Simon both tended to get a little put out at some of the lesser mortals that they had to endure. From the story Sylvia had told, her family was slightly less giving than a rattlesnake. Simon was crushed thinking about the two of them being separated for that long. She had made a big difference in Simon since she had moved to Scenic Sanderson to be the school nurse. Simon was the AG and shop teacher. They met the first day of school and fell madly in love. So drastic had been the change that the teachers at SHS called that day the rebirth of Simon Wells. Before Sylvia, he'd always been a little wild, crazy, mischievous, and more than a little harebrained. Since that first day of school back in August, they had spent almost every minute with each other. They were, to put it mildly, the talk of the town. 2 weeks from today school would be out. Sean told him, "You can go to San Antonio then." If anything, the thought of going 2 weeks without Sylvia sent Simon into an even blacker mood. If Sean was a betting man, he'd bet that Simon wouldn't make it a week before he headed to San Antonio. She'd asked if he would put the few things she had in his garage until she could send someone for them. They weren't breaking up, thank God, because Sean didn't think Simon could have stood that. It was at about this time that the waitress dropped off a fresh basket of chips and another bowl of salsa. As if to further confuse Sean, Simon started grinning. The grin went to a chuckle, then to a full-blown belly laugh. Thinking that he'd been pulling one of his well-known and usually not funny practical jokes, Sean asked what's going on. "Look at the table," he said. Sean still didn't have a clue as what he was talking about, and said as much. After the waitress left, Simon leaned across the table and asked, "Do you know her?" "Her who?" Sean asked. "The waitress," he shot back. "She's been hovering around you, rubbing on you, and asking if you need anything every 2 minutes. Damn, Sean, it's not like you not to notice." Well, when she made her next round, Sean did take notice. He noticed she looked like she was 18 years old. He also noticed that she was drop-dead gorgeous, but Sean had long since given up on impressing little girls. After she refilled Sean's already full tea glass and left more fresh chips and salsa, there were now 5 bowls of salsa and 3 baskets of chips for the two of them. "She must think I'm a big tipper," Sean laughed. He was glad that Simon's mood had lifted, and if it cost him some teasing, it'd be a small price to pay. Simon and Sean ate their meal. All the while this 18-year-old beauty came and went, back and forth every 2 or 3 minutes. She reminded Sean of a butterfly with one of those feeders full of the red juice. So they sat, laughing, talking, and watching the butterfly. It didn't take very much paranoia to see she was spending far more time with them than her other tables. They sat, talked, and watched the butterfly for an hour more than they should have. Sean finally had to remind Simon that they still had over 6 hours of driving before the day was over. Simon excused himself, leaving his credit card to take care of the check. Sean pulled out a $10 bill to leave for the butterfly. Somewhere in the last hour, she had gone from a butterfly to the butterfly and waited for Simon to come back. When after 15 minutes Simon hadn't returned, Sean started looking around for him. Finally, he spotted him standing over by the bar. All Sean could see was his left arm and every so often the back of his head. It was plain enough that he was talking to someone, but Sean couldn't see who it was, and with Simon, there was no telling. He didn't want to leave Simon's credit card on the table, so he waited a little longer. Sean was standing up and reaching for the credit card when Simon turned around and started back to the table. Not 10 feet behind him was the butterfly with the check. Simon sat down, motioning for Sean to do the same. "Who did you run into this time?" Sean asked. "Nobody." Simon told him he had decided to have one more beer. Sean was more than a little put out, and with the hope of catching a nap on the way home gone. He reminded Simon how he felt about drinking and driving. Sean was about to tell him how the cow ate the cabbage when he heard the butterfly's cheerful voice ask, "Is there anything I can get for you, Sean?" Still pissed at Simon, he told her no. She'd already scooped up the check and credit card and took off when Sean realized she had used his name. He was still sitting there 10 minutes later trying to figure out how he'd missed the introductions when she returned. She handed Simon his card and copy of the bill back. Turning to Sean, she asked, "Was everything all right, Sean?" Sean was pretty sure from the grin on Simon's face that something was up. The matchmaking bullshit was coming to mind. He got up and found the little room marked hombres and left some of the half-gallon of iced tea that the butterfly had poured. When Sean stepped out of the restroom, he caught a glimpse of Simon winking at the butterfly. Before Sean got to the exit, she came up to Sean and said, "I'll see you real soon, okay? Sure, next time I'm in town I'll stop by." Sean told her, knowing full well that it had been 15 years since he'd been in Lubbock, and it might be another 15 before he was back. As Sean walked to the truck, he noticed a bookstore's bright green sign on the other side of the parking lot. Simon threw Sean his keys, knowing Sean wouldn't let him drive. Sean just walked past the truck and into the bookstore. Simon let out a groan that could be heard above the traffic noise. Any member of the Miles family in a bookstore was like a kid in a candy shop. The last thing Sean heard from Simon was something about getting a room. When he didn't show up behind Sean in the bookstore, Sean figured he'd gone back in the restaurant for more beer. One thing was sure, if he gave him any shit about that girl, he'd remind him that he was the one that went back inside, and what Miss Sylvia Guerra would do to him for flirting with another woman. Sean had told him the first time Simon had told him what her last name was that he was in trouble. Her name meant war in Spanish. Sean wandered around the bookstore for over an hour. His mood had gone a little black, thinking about Simon, Sylvia, the butterfly, and what it would be like to be in love. He couldn't ever remember feeling about Dana the way Simon felt about Sylvia. Maybe that's why it ended in divorce in 2 months. 2 months of a marriage, living with a woman filled with hate and betrayal. She filed for divorce and told him she would get half of everything he had, and she did. He had just over $1,000 in a bank account. The judge had him give her $521.24. She kept screaming and cussing till the judge found her in contempt of court and fined her $1,000. When Sean turned 25, his parents signed over the ranch to him. 3 years too late for Dana to strike it rich. Sean finally left the bookstore with 3 volumes of poetry, a collection of murder mysteries by an English author he'd never heard of, the newest Kelton Western. Sean bought the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis on CD for the school library. In truth, they are for Johnny Diaz, a little boy who has been blind since birth. Simon told him that one of the new teachers had been teaching him Braille. This store had a few books in Braille, so he loaded up all that he thought would be of interest to the little boy. And lastly, Sean picked up a copy of Veinte Poemas de Amor y una canción desesperada by Pablo Neruda, 20 love poems, and a song of despair. Somehow the last one just seemed appropriate. He stuck the books and CDs in the cab of the truck and started for the restaurant to get Simon. He was standing at the end of the bar talking to the girl that had seated them earlier, and to you-know-who. The place was empty except for Simon and Sean and the 2 girls. The butterfly saw him, smiled, and poked Simon, who whispered something to her, and started for the door. "Sean," she called out. He turned around to face her. She smiled, blew him a kiss, and winked, saying, "I'll see you soon." As Sean turned and walked away, he thought he should be so lucky. Simon looked at Sean as he unlocked the truck and asked what he was thinking about. "Oh, I was just thinking what you'd look like if Sylvia found out about the butterfly." He grinned back at Sean and said, "You might be surprised what she'd think." There was something going on, but Sean was damned if he knew what it was. Simon was asleep before they'd gone 10 miles. It was a long, lonely drive back that night. Sean passed the miles away thinking that next year he'd be 30 years old with no wife, no kids, and no prospects. "See you soon," she'd said. Yeah, he'd bet she wouldn't be awake all night thinking about a 30-year-old cowboy. Yep, it was going to be a lonely night for Sean. Just like the hundreds of lonely nights in his past, and the hundreds in his future. A long, lonely night. The trip from Lubbock to Dryden was 6 hours long. 6 hours of driving with Simon, sleeping the whole way. So while Simon slept, Sean tried to make sense out everything he was feeling. The girl at the restaurant was baffling. What could she possibly see in him? Why didn't he talk to her? Why couldn't he have at least asked her name? Questions, that was all Sean brought back from Lubbock. A bushel basket full of questions, unasked and unanswered. At the same time that Sean and Simon were starting back to Sanderson, Sue Bell was sitting in John J. Dillard's office plotting their next move. The murder of Dan Bell had gone off without a hitch. For months earlier, J.D. Tatum had rigged the old ranch truck's brakes to fail, and that, plus the not-so-gentle nudge he had given it, sent the old pickup crashing into the deep box canyon, coming to rest upside down in the spring-fed pond at the bottom. The authorities had ruled it an accident, and that would have been just fine except that Dan Bell had thrown a wrench in the works. The day before he died, Dan Bell had made a new will and had transferred everything into his daughter's name. This will left Sue with only the small amount guaranteed to her by the prenuptial agreement they had signed, and for Sue, that just wouldn't be enough. So Sue started, what do we have to do now? She looked at John J., loathing him, but at the present still needing him. The problem was she didn't trust him any farther than she could throw him, and that wasn't far. Simple, kill the girl. With Ava dead, you can argue surviving spouse. Sue pondered the lawyer's suggestion. If she had Ava killed, that would give her the ranch and the money, but she would have to kill this slimy lawyer as well if she wanted to keep it. J.D. wouldn't have a problem killing either of them, and she had J.D. under her thumb, so that would not be a problem. After pacing the room several times, she turned to John J. All right, I'll take care of everything. You just make sure there aren't any more paperwork surprises. John J. nodded his head. He was already cooking up a plan to make damn sure he ended up with the ranch and the cash. When Ava saw the tall man in the cowboy hat come in, her heart almost stopped. This was not going to be a normal Friday night. Her dad had told her that when the right man came along, she'd know. This had to be him. There was just something about him. In a way, though, it didn't make sense. Ava wasn't the cowgirl type. She didn't like C&W music all that much, and she sure wasn't into the party scene like her roommates. No, Ava liked the simple life, birds singing, fireplaces, and good books. So what was it about this guy that had her so excited? She caught up with Sarah as she was going back to get the cowboy and his friend and take them to a table. Sarah saw that her friend was starry-eyed over one of these two cowboys and agreed to seat them in her section. Ava was at their table before they could sit down. All Sarah saw was two guys that had to be at least 10 years older than Ava. Both were wearing work clothes, clean, but she almost expected the two cowboys to be tracking manure through the restaurant. It didn't take long to see which of the two Ava was interested in. The taller of the two, he wore a long-sleeved blue cotton work shirt and Wranglers. His boots were plain-looking, not fancy snakeskin like the Saturday night crowd. Neither of the guys had the stiff starch and creases seen on most of the cowboy types. Ava had picked up on all the things that Sarah had and more. Growing up on her dad's ranch had taught her the difference between a working cowboy and the drugstore variety. The one Ava had her eye on right now was a working cowboy, of that she was sure. The boots gave it away. They were what they called mule skin. Made from thick harness leather, they were tough. The heel was a riding heel, and there were scuff marks left by the everyday use of spurs. She saw other things as well. His walk had that swagger that her dad had had, like the old-time cowboys. She remembered her dad talking about the men who, if they couldn't do a job from the back of a horse, they didn't want to do it. She was sure that this man was just such a man. He also had an air about him that said he didn't need to impress anyone. While she was taking their drink order, tea for her man and beer for the other guy, she looked at his ring finger. No ring and no white band of skin where one had recently been taken off. She just hoped above all hope that there was no girlfriend. As she was setting the drinks on the table, her eyes met his. She froze. His eyes were steel blue, with a twinkle that spoke of someone who was fun to be with. If she had not been taken with this guy before, the look they had exchanged had erased any doubt. He smiled and thanked her for the tea. Her heart was pounding as she walked away. After that look, Ava was walking on clouds. She never missed a chance to take something to his table. The two men ate their meal, then sat and talked for over an hour. Dozens of times during that hour, she caught him stealing glances at her. Every time she turned to walk away, she could feel his gaze upon her back. She listened intently on each visit, trying to catch his name. It was driving her crazy. Finally, his friend got up to head for the restroom. Ava was standing at the end of the bar getting a drink order for another customer when the friend spoke to her. "Are you interested in that cowboy?" the friend asked. Ava felt like she should be embarrassed, but at the same time, she wanted to find out who he was. "Yes. Who is he? Where is he from?" Her voice was quivering. Simon could see the emotion in her eyes. She looked like Simon had felt that first time he saw Sylvia. "His name is Sean Miles." He has a ranch southwest of Dryden, Texas. Ava asked the question she most feared. Does he have a girlfriend? Simon smiled and shook his head no, not in a long time. He's pretty lonely. Simon could see that a huge weight had been lifted from the girl, but he had to make sure of some things himself. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a cell phone and called Sylvia. Sylvia, I think I found her, he said into the phone. Ava couldn't believe what the man had said. She was even more shocked when he handed her the phone. Hello, who am I speaking to? Ava asked. Hi Sylvia, my name? Ava. I'm 19, or will be next month. Next weekend? I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, here he is. She handed the phone back to Simon. Simon had to laugh. Ava looked more shocked now than when he first spoke to her. The bartender tapped her on the shoulder and brought her out of her dream. Your drink order, he said, shaking his head, wondering what planet she was off to. Ava grabbed the tray of drinks and took them to the waiting customers. Simon finished his plotting with Sylvia and headed back to the table. Ava spoke to Sean on her next trip to his table. He didn't seem to realize that she had called him by name. But 10 minutes later, when she brought the check to the table, she said, Sean, is there anything that I can get you? He looked almost shocked. For what seemed an eternity, he just stared at her. Ava wanted to throw her arms around him and kiss him and scream at the top of her lungs that she loved him. The drunken college student in the third booth started yelling for her to bring him another drink. She went to the drunk and gave him a withering look, then to further humiliate him demanded that he surrender his keys. The drunk was still trying to figure out what happened to the waitress who had been so bubbly and happy all night. The manager, having already heard the shouting, had called a taxi. Ava handed him the keys and turned to find the booth where Sean and Simon had been sitting empty. She was about to drop to the floor, crying, when she saw him stepping out of the restroom. Ava started towards him, not really knowing what she was going to do. Sean was headed for the door and didn't see her, but she saw Simon and he motioned for her to come to him. Reluctantly, she obeyed. Simon gave her a card with his number and a number for Sylvia in San Antonio on it. Don't worry. Call Sylvia, we'll work something out. Simon told her. Somehow it felt as though the love of her life was slipping through her fingers and there was very little she could do. Simon told her goodbye and walked out the door. As soon as the door closed behind him, Ava went to the restroom, locked herself into a stall, and started crying. She was sure that she would never see Sean again, and it was just too much. She was so upset that she didn't know Sarah had come in looking for her until she started knocking on the stall door. Ava, are you all right? Sarah asked. No, go away, Ava sobbed. Ava, that guy is back. He's asking for you, Sarah explained. Sean. Oh my God. Sean is out there. Ava was really panicked now. No, the other one. He said his name was Simon, Sarah said, still dumbfounded that her friend could get so upset over this guy. Ava stopped crying, went to the sink, and started washing her face. She fixed her hair back and went out to see what Simon wanted. When Simon saw her, he could tell she had been crying, but with his limited experience with women, he didn't have a clue as to why. Simon told her that Sean had gone to the bookstore across the parking lot, and he would be there until they threw him out. Bookstores were historically something of a weakness in the Miles family, he explained. They sat at the far end of the bar, and in between customers, Ava learned about Sean. An hour and a half later, Sean walked back into the room. Ava had already found out that they had to make the long 6-hour drive back tonight, as Sean had livestock to take care of. She asked Sean if he wanted something to drink. He said some iced tea to go would be nice. When Jake the bartender told Ava that he'd take care of it, she never even answered him. She'd looked into Sean's eyes and had become completely lost, unable to say a word. Ava was brought out of her trance when Jake handed the tea to Sean. Simon paid his tab and said goodbye, and he and Sean headed for the door. Ava was staring at Sean's back as he walked away when Sarah poked her. Surprised, Ava called out, Sean, see you soon. Okay. Sean had turned at hearing his name and said, sure, I'll stop by next time I'm here, everyone, but Ava, that heard his response, doubted his sincerity. Ava just sighed and blew him a kiss. Sarah and Jake shook their heads. They saw a heartbreak in the making. That night, Ava lay awake for hours thinking about Sean. The question kept coming up. Was she really in love with this man she barely knew? A man she had really never talked with? The answer would change her life. She put her hand on the medallion around her neck and said a short prayer. Then she surrendered to sleep. Saturday morning found Ava happier than she had been in months. She got up, ate a light breakfast, and went next door. For the last 6 months, Ava had been going next door to sit with Mrs. Logan while her daughter, Sandra Smith, did her weekly shopping. It wasn't that she needed to be watched, but that Ava had come to cherish the time she spent with the spry 80-year-old woman. She had taught Ava many things Ava's stepmother couldn't or wouldn't. Ava had learned to can fruits and vegetables, make pickles, knit, and for the past month, Annabelle, Mrs. Logan, had been teaching her to crochet. Today's lesson was fast turning into a waste of thread. Ava was so excited. She told Annabelle every detail about her meeting the man of her dreams. Annabelle listened as Ava repeated the story over and over, but smiled as she thought back to when she was in love. Finally, when Ava slowed in her tale of love, Annabelle asked her the questions that normally a mother would ask. For the next 2 hours, Ava got advice from someone who had been happily married for 53 years. Some of the things Annabelle told her made Ava blush, but she had to admit that Annabelle's descriptions and instructions were much better than anything her stepmother or her rowdy roommates had told her. The day passed quickly. She ate supper with Sandra and Annabelle that night since she had the next 2 nights off from the restaurant. Sunday, her roommates were all acting strangely. A new girl had shown up sometime late Saturday night or Sunday morning, and there was a lot of whispering going on. Ava was in too good of a mood to be bothered by her roommates' juvenile games. She spent the day reading and surfing the net looking for information on Dryden, Texas. Monday, Ava had the lunch shift at the restaurant from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. When she left that morning, her roommates were still in bed. Ava pulled into the driveway, still enjoying the high from Friday night, but that all ended when she walked into the house. There, piled in the living room floor, was almost everything she owned. Sitting around the room were her 4 roommates and a new girl. Charlotte told Ava that she was to be out of the house that day, and anything left in the house would be thrown away. The new girl, Michelle, had already moved into her old room. Ava started to cry and then decided that, no, they weren't worth it. Ava called Sarah and told her what had happened and asked if she could get her boyfriend to bring his pickup and a dolly over to help her. She started loading her clothes into the Jeep Cherokee her dad had bought her when she turned 16. No one lifted a finger to help her. After she cleared the stuff from the floor, she took 2 boxes into the kitchen and loaded all the food and cleaning supplies that belonged to her. Her roommates had forgotten that the washer and dryer belonged to Ava. They told her she could leave them if she wanted. When she said that she didn't want to, they offered to buy them from her. When Josh and Sarah got there, he helped Ava unhook the washer and dryer. With the roommates looking on, Ava asked Josh if he had $2. Josh reached in his wallet and removed 2 $1 bills. Ava asked him if he would like the washer and dryer. He said yes. But before he could finish the sentence, Ava grabbed the $2 and said, "Come on, I'll help you load them." The roommates were fuming. Michelle was further angered when Ava had Josh help her remove the day bed and the rest of the bedroom furniture. Josh and Sarah offered Ava their spare bedroom, but at this point she wasn't sure what she should do. For the moment, though, Sarah and Josh took Ava's furniture and his new washer and dryer back to his house. Ava went next door to tell Sandra and Annabelle what had happened and to ask their advice. After Ava told her story to Annabelle, she finally gave in to the tears. Sandra and Annabelle held her as she cried out her hurt. Annabelle handed her a tissue and asked, "Isn't there someone in San Antonio you need to call?" It was something that she hadn't thought about, but Annabelle was right. Her stepmother had emptied her college account. That was why she wasn't enrolled in college this semester. The only thing keeping her in Lubbock was the job at the restaurant. Calling Sylvia would be a good place to start on her new life. Annabelle handed her the phone, while Ava pulled out the piece of paper with the phone number on it. Ava dialed the number. "Hello, Sylvia, this is Ava." Ava told her story to Sylvia, and it didn't take long for Sylvia to come up with a plan. For days later, the restaurant in Lubbock, J.D. Tatum was pissed. Sue Bell, Ava's stepmother, had sent him to Lubbock 3 days ago to make Ava disappear. He went to the restaurant where she worked and waited at the bar for 4 hours. The bartender wasn't very friendly, and when he had asked about Ava, he had said she didn't work there anymore and wouldn't give him any more information than that. J.D. walked to the pay phone by the restrooms and made his call. She's not living in Lubbock anymore. Her roommates sent her packing. One of them thought she was going to some place called Dryden. This a-hole bartender won't tell me anything either. J.D. listened as Sue Bell talked. "Yeah, okay, I'll be back in just a little bit." J.D. hung up the phone, paid his bill, and walked out of the restaurant. Jake called Sarah over to the bar. "Did you see that guy that just left?" "Yeah, the creep put his hand on my butt." Sarah was visibly mad. While Jake started, he was asking about Ava. Jake opened the register and took out the receipt. "His name is J.D. Tatum. He made a call on the pay phone over there," pointing towards the restroom. "J.D. That's the guy Ava's stepmother was living with, I think." Ava didn't trust him. Sarah was worried now. The bad feeling Jake had must have been catching, because now Sarah had it too. "Jake, can you find out who he called?" Jake nodded his head and picked up the phone. Sarah knew that Jake had friends and friends of friends on both sides of the law. In 2 days, Jake would know all there was to know about J.D. Tatum. Sarah looked at her watch. She would have to try the number Ava had left her. She just hoped she could reach her and warn her that J.D. was looking for her. The next week was a miserable one for Sean. He couldn't get the butterfly off his mind. There it was again, butterfly. He didn't even know the girl's name. Every day Sean thought up 4 or 5 more things he'd have liked to ask her. Calling her was out of the question. First, he lived too far out in the boonies to have a phone, and even if he had one, he still didn't have the girl's number. He guessed he could go into town and call the restaurant. But then what would he say if he called? Hello. I was eating supper in there last week. I need to talk to my waitress. Her name? Oh, we called her the Butterfly. Even if they didn't think he was nuts, they'd think he was some kind of stalker. For the 10,000th time, he cursed his stupidity for not asking her name. He spent many hours thinking about the girl, but he had also discussed the matter thoroughly with Dunny. Dunny, however, had offered no solutions, and being a horse was not likely to do so any time in the near future. Daylight hours saw him talking out loud to every animal and inanimate object on the ranch. Nighttime found him sleeping in a bed that suddenly, after all these years, had become unbearably empty. By Friday, Sean was ready to head to Lubbock, or the nearest nut house. Coming to the conclusion that he could not stand another week, a plan was made. He fed the horses, then turned them out into the house pasture. He cleaned and filled up an old pig feeder with dog food. He bathed, shaved, and ran the old flat iron over his shirt and Wranglers. It was at this point that he noticed his best Wranglers were at best a little ragged and more than a little bit faded. Then it hit him, the M.L. Letty suit in the closet. The suit he'd bought for his parents' funeral. He got the suit out of the plastic bag and gave it a quick going over with a clothes brush, and it was good to go. Sean put on his best white dress shirt and grabbed the tie he'd bought to go with the suit. He'd put the tie on when he got to Lubbock. He packed a small bag with his best shirts and Wranglers, reminding himself once again that he needed to buy a new pair or two. With a change of clothes and the rest of his kit in the pickup, Sean closed up the house and headed to Sanderson. As he drove into town, he made a mental list of the other things he needed to do. He needed to go by the bank, the school, grab a quick bite to eat at the cafe, and then he was going to find that girl one way or another. When Sean walked into the bank, conversations stopped save a whisper or two. The bank manager and head teller were staring open-mouthed at him. The silence was finally broken when Susan Quintera, known locally as Susie Q, asked, "Who died?" Everyone in the bank knew about the surprise that Simon and Sylvia had cooked up for Sean. The whole town knew about the new girl in town who was helping Sam at the cafe and giving Sylvia a hand with her mother. Rumor had it that she was here to meet Sean. What worried Susan was the thought that someone had spilled the beans. Sean was in no mood for teasing and bluntly stated, "It's just a suit. Ain't you ever seen a suit?" "Not on you," Susie commented. Then she remembered seeing that same suit when they had buried his parents. She was really wishing she could take back the "who died" comment. Sean walked up to the teller. Susie Q made a call to Simon to find out if Sean knew what was going on. The teller, meanwhile, tried to make polite conversation in order to worm out of Sean what he was up to. Sean, already a little defensive after Susie's earlier comment, stated rather loudly that if they must know he was going back to Lubbock on business. Susie, sitting at her desk, had just taken a drink of coffee when Sean made his announcement. She sprayed coffee all over her desk. Still on the phone to Simon, she asked in a slightly strangled voice, "Did you hear that?" She then quickly explained to Simon what he'd said. "You better get here quick or he'll be looking for that girl in the wrong town." Simon was in a panic by that point. A call to Sylvia was in order. In the past week, Doc Eller had arranged for Sylvia's mother to be transferred to Sanderson. The stroke had been minor, and Sylvia's mom wanted to get away from the humidity of San Antonio. In Sanderson, there was no shortage of folks to help look after her, and Doc Eller would come by every day to check on her. You couldn't get that kind of service in San Antonio. Sylvia got Simon calmed down, called the bank, and told Susie to stall Sean. Stalling Sean, however, was no easy task. He was starting to walk out the door when Sylvia got to the bank. "Sylvia, what are you doing here?" Sean quizzed. "Nice to see you, too, Sean. Did someone die?" Sylvia returned. "For crying out loud, can't a guy look nice every once in a while?" Sean complained. He was getting a little touchy about the suit and was wishing he hadn't put the damn thing on. "No, you look nice. Have you talked to Simon about this weekend?" Sylvia asked. "Well, I'm not going to be here this weekend. I'm going to Lubbock." Sean replied. "What for?" Sylvia was grinning when she asked. "It's none of your damn business what I'm going for." Sean was getting pissed. He had never been one to meddle in other folks' business and didn't much appreciate people not giving him the same consideration. Sylvia's smile turned into a frown, and she slowly shook her head. "I'm sorry, Sean, she's not there anymore." Still trying to salvage the planned surprise, she continued. "I tried calling Tuesday after Simon told me about her. Monday was her last day there." Sean felt like he'd been kicked. He didn't say a word, just started walking back to his pickup. Sylvia had never seen Sean show that much emotion. Now she was afraid that she might be carrying the joke a bit too far. She called out to him, but it was as though he was in shock. He didn't answer, he didn't stop, he just walked back to his truck, got in, and headed back to the ranch. Sylvia was stunned. This wasn't the way it was supposed to turn out. She had no way of knowing what the past week had done to Sean. She never thought about the possibility that Sean had already fallen in love with the girl. Simon talked like he hadn't been interested in her. The full impact of what she had said, combined with how he had reacted, hit Sylvia like a ton of bricks. She had just started crying when Simon drove up to the bank. Sean felt like his heart had been ripped out. He didn't hear Sylvia call to him, didn't even hear the car that honked at him when he drove through the stop sign. He was going back to the ranch, by himself, alone, just like he'd been for years. All alone. Over the last few days he had convinced himself that she was the one he could love, and she could love him. Now all that was gone. He opened the door of the ranch house and walked in, heading straight to his bedroom. He didn't remember turning off the highway, nor did he remember any of the 7 push gates that he had gone through to get home. It didn't matter now, he was home. Back in Sanderson, Simon was trying to pry from Sylvia what had happened. He saw Sean drive off, running the stop sign at the end of the street, headed back to the ranch. Simon had never seen Sylvia this upset. After getting Sylvia to calm down, she told Simon what had happened. The original plan was to go out to Sean's ranch Saturday to ride horses, cook some steaks, and enjoy Sean's hot tub. Something the two of them did almost every weekend. The surprise was to be bringing Ava as a guest. Now that plan had been knocked into a cocked hat, they decided that they couldn't wait any longer. Sylvia called Doc Eller to make sure someone could take care of her mother till Sunday. Simon called the cafe and told Ava that the plans had changed and they would be headed to the ranch in the next 30 minutes, and she'd need a change of clothes. At the cafe, Simon's call created a minor panic. Ava hung up the phone, turned to Sam, and said, "Something has happened. We're going to the ranch today instead of tomorrow." Ava had a look of absolute panic. 5 minutes ago, she'd been excited but anxious about meeting Sean. Now, she looked at Sam with a pleading look. What could have happened? Sam smiled. She knew Sean better than anyone. In the course of all those hours riding the bus back and forth to school, Sean and Sam had developed a friendship closer than most marriages. "He's been out at that ranch all week wondering about you, if you were the one. I'd bet he came to town to go to the bank or buy some clothes on his way to Lubbock." Ava dropped onto the stool at the end on the counter like she'd been shot. "Do you think that's what happened?" she asked. "Look," Sam explained, "Sean and I spent almost 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, riding that damn school bus. We talked from the first grade till we graduated from high school. He's the best friend I have. And if you'll remember, I told you Tuesday night, while you 3 sat right over there plotting this thing, that he'd never make it till Saturday before coming to town." Ava looked at Samantha Miller with a new respect, and also a little curiosity as to why Sam and Sean had never got together. Or had they? Ava was slipping into a dream-like trance thinking about Sam and Sean when Sam jarred her into the present. "You better get a move on, sugar. You're going to want a change of clothes, aren't you?" Sam asked. "Oh shit," she blurted, then blushed blaze red. "I've got to get to Sylvia's house." Ava hit the door at a dead run, across the pothole-strewn parking lot, and grabbed the door handle of the Jeep. Locked. Keys. Purse. Damn it. She turned to run back to the cafe. Sam shook her head and met her in the parking lot with her purse. "Slow down, Ava. And take off your apron," Sam told her as Ava got in her Jeep. "Ava, he's a great guy, and from what I've seen of you this week, he's getting a great gal. Just slow down and enjoy each other. When you get back Sunday night, we'll have a talk. Just me and you. Now get." Sam closed the door on the Jeep and sent Ava on her way to meet Sean. Meet him and find out if he felt like she did. Simon pulled up to the front of Sylvia's house. Sylvia had a small bag with a change of clothes. She put them on the back floorboard of Simon's crew cab pickup. "Where's that girl? We have got to go." Sylvia was beside herself. "Just calm down, Syl. It's going to be all right." Simon had already told her this at least 10 times since the incident at the bank, but it didn't appear that she was any nearer being convinced. And if the truth were known, Simon wasn't all that convinced either. About this time, the now familiar red Jeep Cherokee came sliding around the corner and skidded to a stop behind Simon's truck. It had barely stopped rolling as the door flew open and the petite Ava bailed out at a dead run heading for the house, her apron flying behind her like Superman's cape, only white with mustard stains. "Be just a sec," she yelled as she went in the house, the screen door slamming shut behind her. 5 minutes later, she came out of the house at about the same speed she went in. She was about to throw her bag in the back of the truck when Simon said, "Here, you don't want to ride that back there. It'll be full of dust by the time we get there." Ava got in the back seat behind Simon. Sylvia sat on the front passenger side. For the first 5 miles, no one said a word. Finally, Ava broke the silence and asked, "What happened?" Sylvia broke down and started crying. After 3 attempts to explain the day's events ended in sobs, Simon looked at Sylvia. Before Simon could start the tale, Ava started crying as well. "If you two will stop crying, it's going to be all right," Simon started. He explained to Ava how Sean had come to town to get money so he could go to Lubbock to find her. No sooner had Ava's tears stopped than her laughter started. She laughed harder and harder until once again the tears were flowing, but this time for joy. because now she knew that Sean had wanted to see her again. Sylvia was beside herself. What's so funny? Ava, still chuckling, said, Sam was right. What do you mean, Sam was right? Simon asked, confused. Don't you remember that night at the cafe? Ava grinned. Sam said it wouldn't work. Then Simon remembered. Sam had predicted that Sean would make it to Lubbock by Saturday. He just hadn't believed her. Now Simon started laughing too, and within moments, Sylvia was laughing so hard she nearly lost her breath. Simon turned off the highway and onto the long dirt road leading to the Bar None Ranch. How much farther is it, Simon? Ava asked. The bumpy road reminded her of something she had rushed through earlier. 25 rough, dusty miles, Simon replied, already guessing why she was asking. But he couldn't resist teasing her a little anyway. Looking around at the wide, open desert, Ava decided that it wasn't going to get any better. Simon, would you mind stopping a minute? Yeah, no problem, Ava. We're coming up on Sylvia's hill. Simon's comment netted him a slap on the shoulder. Simon slowed, then stopped at the crest of a steep hill. As soon as the truck stopped, Sylvia and Ava bailed out of the truck. Simon eased the truck down the other side of the hill to give the girls some privacy. A few minutes later, the girls climbed back in the truck and they headed to the ranch. As the ride to the ranch was coming to an end, Simon got Ava's attention and said, Ava, it's just 2 more miles to the house. The panic Ava felt at the cafe had returned in force. What would Sean say? What should she say to him? Ava was still deep in thought when the pickup began to slow to a stop. Simon eased up to the last of the 7 push gates and stopped. Ava, who had been in her own little world since Sylvia and she had made their pit stop, looked at Simon and asked, Do you need me to open the gate? No. It's a push gate just like the 6 others we've gone through. Simon laughed and wondered where her mind had been for the last 23 miles. A push gate is a gate that's designed to open by pushing it open with a pickup. They're made so that they close on their own. We just had regular gates and cattle guards on my dad's ranch. Ava replied, Why do you use them here? Simon put the truck into first gear and floored it. The truck accelerated through the gate. It swung all the way open, then held still just for a brief second or two. The sheep and goats don't respect the cattle guards all that much, Simon replied. Ava turned in her seat to watch the gate close and was shocked as the gate, made from 2-inch steel pipe, swung back and forth with more than enough force to crush a car. Guess it wouldn't pay to stop in the wrong place. Huh. Nope, it wouldn't. Simon said, Do you see that steel T-post this side of the gate? Yeah, there was another one on the other side. Ava answered, What are they for? That marks the point where the gate swings. If you stop inside of those posts, your car will get scratched, Simon said, repeating the joke he made every year when he brought hunters into the ranch. Scratched. Ava exclaimed, Totaled would be more like it. Only then did Ava realize that Simon had sucked her in on another of his jokes. She smiled as she thought about how fast she had been accepted. She wondered if it would stay that way if Sean didn't like her. There it is. Simon's voice brought her back to the real world. From the top of the hill, you could see the ranch headquarters laid out in the valley in front of them. There were huge cottonwood trees lining the creek that wound through a lush green meadow. Out in the meadow, horses, mules, and a few cows were grazing. The road wound down the hill, then disappeared under the canopy of oaks and pecans. After the desert scenery on the drive to the ranch, the view of the meadow and all the trees seemed out of place. At the far end of the valley, Ava could see several buildings. The ranch house, a large adobe building, was mostly hidden by the trees. From the point they were at on the road, all that could be seen was the sun reflecting off the solar panels on the roof. Off to the east were several small sheds. Sitting even further back were 2 small houses separated from each other by 50 or 60 yards. The barn sat almost 300 yards north of those 2 houses. It was 2 stories tall, adobe with a sheet metal roof. There were pens and sheds off to the side. But the thing that had Ava's attention right now was the light reflecting off the 2 lakes as it passed through the oak and pecan trees. There were so many trees, Ava couldn't believe what she was seeing. Is that water over there? She pointed. Those are ponds. There are 3 of them that are fed by the springs back behind the house. They are all crystal clear. We go snorkeling in them when it's warm. Simon explained. Oh wow. Ava was so excited now she could hardly contain herself. Is that an observatory? She pointed to the white dome that had just come into view. The contrast of the white dome against the green shades of the trees made the dome jump out of the scenery. Memories of the many nights Ava and her father spent looking at the stars came flooding back. Sylvia was laughing at Ava's excitement. She looked like a kid on Christmas Day. Sean just put that in last year. He was tired of lugging his telescope to the top of that hill. Simon chimed in. It's over 19 feet wide. He ended up buying another telescope. What kind of telescope is it? Ava asked. All I know is that it's about 16 inches in diameter and everything about it is computerized, Simon told her. But didn't you tell me that there is no phone and no electricity? There's not. but he put in some solar panels and batteries to take care of the computer and the telescope. Simon laughed. They drove down the road and out of the bright sunlight and into the shade as the road wandered underneath the canopy of the trees. Look over there. Simon pointed towards the 3 white-tailed does grazing beneath the trees. Watch up here on the left, Ava. There are usually some turkeys out in that clearing. Today the turkeys were nowhere in sight. Instead, 6 javelinas, small pig-like creatures native to West Texas, rooted under the big oak at the edge of the clearing. This place is so beautiful, Ava exclaimed. It really is an oasis, isn't it? Ava couldn't get over the change in the landscape after miles and miles of desert. Suddenly, over a hill and into a valley of trees where there was lush green grass and running water, Simon drove the last half-mile to the ranch house. Sean's 2 dogs met them. The dogs knew Simon's pickup, and rather than barking, they followed his truck, wagging their tails. As they got out of the truck, Ava knew that if this wasn't the moment of truth, then it soon would be. All the doubt, worry, and wondering would soon be over, one way or the other. As they walked up onto the wraparound porch, Simon and Sylvia held up and let Ava walk up to the door alone. Ava stepped up to the wood-framed screen door and then turned to look at Simon and Sylvia. Simon smiled. Well, go ahead. Knock. Ava knocked. As she waited with her heart in her throat, she examined the woodwork on the screen door. It almost seemed out of place, the ornate Victorian trim of the door on the white stucco of the adobe house. Sean heard the knock on the door. Since he hadn't heard the dogs barking, that meant that Simon and, no doubt, Sylvia were here. The last thing he wanted was company. He wanted to be left alone. Ava knocked again, then bucking up her courage another notch, she knocked again, even harder. Sean had had enough. Go away. He shouted, leave me alone. All alone, Sean thought. That's all I'll ever be, is alone. Ava had been unsure when she first knocked on the screen door, but hearing the hurt in Sean's voice had assured her. Why, Sean? Ava called through the screen door. Why should I leave you alone? Sean froze, his heart rate doubling in an instant. When he had heard the first 2 words, he thought it was Sylvia. The second time she spoke, though, jarred him. That wasn't Sylvia, Sean said quietly to himself. He wanted to ask who it was. At the same time, he knew who it was. But how? Why? Ava wasn't sure why it was taking so long for him to answer. Sean, she called again. Why should I leave you alone? Tell me, I want to know. Sean got off the bed, his clothes wrinkled from sleeping in them for the last hour. He turned the corner from the hallway to where he could see the front door. The sight that met him stopped him dead in his tracks. His heart was pounding, his mouth suddenly dry. He didn't know what to say and wasn't sure he could have said it if he knew. He was well read, with a college education, and there he was standing in a cold sweat, struck absolutely dumb. He stood there staring at her through the screen door, afraid to move, then, just as suddenly, afraid not to. He took the last few steps to the door and pushed it open. Ava heard him moving in the house, then suddenly he came around the corner and froze. He stood there for the longest time, just staring. Finally, he stepped forward and pushed the door open so quickly that Ava had to step aside to keep it from hitting her. Now he stood frozen, holding the door open, still not a word having come from his mouth. They stood for several minutes staring, neither saying a word. After a more than pregnant pause, Sean said, Butterfly, what are you doing here? Ava turned to look behind her. Simon and Sylvia were standing back by the gate, just out of Sean's sight behind one of the ancient junipers that flanked the flagstone walk that led to the front door. They were close enough to see and hear, but too far away to be involved in the conversation. Smiling, she asked, Butterfly, are you talking to me? She was gigging him a bit since Simon had already told her about what Sean had said that night at the restaurant. Even with the shadows, she could see the change in Sean's face. Though tanned from days in the sun, he blushed the deepest shade of scarlet. Your name? He stuttered. I don't even know your real name. Ava was a little surprised. She had assumed that Simon had told him her name, although she hadn't asked him. The sudden thought of him driving 6 hours to Lubbock looking for a girl he called the Butterfly almost caused her to start laughing. It was with no small amount of effort that she suppressed a giggle. Looking at the tall cowboy in sleep-wrinkled clothes, his face blushing scarlet, only added to the humor of situation. My name is Avalini Bell. My friends call me Ava. Ava, it's so good to meet you. I'll find out. I'll learn your name. My name is Sean Thomas Miles. Ava finally let loose a laugh as she finished his sentence. Are you going to invite me in, or are we going to stand here letting in flies? She grinned at him. Sean's face turned even redder, and the heat radiated from it like a wood stove on a cold winter day. I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm thinking. Come in, sit down. Do you want something to drink? Sean ushered her to the formal living room just inside the front door. The furniture was well cared for, but by no means new. Sean had all of the pieces of Victorian furniture reupholstered. Except for a few scratches, it looked little different now than it had when it was unloaded off the ship in Galveston over 100 years ago. Simon and Sylvia had watched the exchange on the porch. Simon grabbed Ava's bags and sat them on the porch. "Come on," Simon said to Sylvia. "Let's go. Go. Now. And leave her here?" Sylvia was floored. "She'll be all right. Sean will bring her to town in a few days." Simon was grinning from ear to ear. "But what if she doesn't like him? Where will she sleep?" Sylvia still couldn't believe Simon was just going to drive off and leave Ava. "Come on, Syl, they'll be fine. You've been saying for a week that all they needed was to spend time with each other. So now they get to spend time with each other, and without us in the way." Simon started to get into the truck. "But what about the steaks and stuff we brought?" Sylvia asked. "Oh yeah, forgot about that." Simon grinned, then grabbed the ice chest and walked over to the summer kitchen, opened the refrigerator that ran off the batteries and solar panels Sean had installed, and put the meat and vegetables away. Sylvia met him with the 2 sacks of miscellaneous groceries that had also been bought for the occasion. After everything was put up, Simon and Sylvia got in his truck and started the long drive back to town. Back inside the house, Sean and Ava shared their life stories for hours as the afternoon passed. It was starting to get dark as the sun began to set. Sean turned to Ava and asked, "How did you find your way out here?" "Simon and Sylvia brought me." "Where are they?" Ava asked. "They must have gone to one of the guest houses. I sure hope they don't mind dirt. Neither of those houses has been cleaned in years." Sean got up and walked to the window and looked out. "That's funny." "What?" Ava got up to see what Sean was looking at. "Simon's truck, it's not here." Sean walked out of the living room and stepped out on the porch. "Is this your bag?" Sean held up the small suitcase to show Ava. "Yes, that's mine." "Did they leave?" she asked. "It sure looks like they did. Don't worry, I can take you back to town." Sean stepped back inside the house and got his hat off the rack by the door. "Are you tired of me already?" Her smile and wink caught him completely off guard. No. You can stay as long as you like." Sean stammered. "Good." She grinned. "Now that we've got that worked out, are you as hungry as I am?" Sean's stomach picked that exact moment to growl loudly, causing him to start laughing. "Yeah, I guess I am. Let's go out to the summer kitchen and see what we can stir up." "What's a summer kitchen?" "Well, it gets pretty hot here most of the time, and cooking in the house just makes it hotter in the house. So they built a kitchen separate from the main house. Mine is screened in, and I have a table out there. I like to eat and watch the sun set." "Come on, I'll show you." Sean started down the porch, but before he could take the first step, Ava reached out and took his hand in hers. They walked side by side, hand in hand, to go have their first meal together. Simon and Sylvia's trip back to town was very quiet. Sylvia wasn't sure that leaving Ava there without saying something was the right thing to do. Simon, on the other hand, didn't have a doubt that leaving her there was the right thing. In fact, he couldn't wait to go to the cafe and tell Sam what he'd done. That had been how he had decided to do it in the first place. He had asked himself, what would Sam do? The answer to that question was leaving them alone and let them work out any differences they had. So straight to the cafe they went. Sam saw Simon and Sylvia pull up to the cafe. Ava wasn't with them, and Simon was grinning from ear to ear. "You left that girl out there, didn't you?" Simon wells. "Yes, I did." Simon was grinning like a fool. "Does she know you left her?" Sam was standing there trying to look like she was angry, when in fact she was tickled to death. Sylvia, thinking that she had been right, and they shouldn't have left her, started in on Simon. "See, I told you that you shouldn't have done that." Sam's face broke into a smile. "I'll tell you right now, Simon." She knew it burned him up to call that. "If she's not back here by Monday night, you're scrawny, but is going to be in here all day Tuesday, waiting tables while I go to Del Rio." Sylvia laughed, and a feeling of dread passed over Simon on hearing those words. The three of them were so wrapped up their conversation that they didn't notice the stranger sitting at the counter nod his head in acknowledgement, and they sure didn't hear him quietly say, "So that's where the little bitch is at." They did see him get up to leave. Sam looked at the $10 bill he'd left with the check. "Did you want your change?" Sam called to him as he walked to the door. "Nah, keep it," he said gruffly, then adding under his breath, "There's plenty more where that came from." Sam, Sylvia, and Simon went back to their conversation, not paying any attention to the man that left. When Ava's hand closed on Sean's, he felt a happiness he had never known. He wasn't sure that it was love, but it felt better than anything he had felt before. After Sean showed Ava around the summer kitchen, they started some water to boil for pasta. Every time they touched it felt electric. The simple act of making spaghetti turned into a slow dance of two people in love for the first time. Sean opened a bottle of wine. They laughed all through supper. Sitting side by side, they watched the sun as it sank behind the hills west of the ranch house. Sean lit a kerosene lamp, and they sat and talked as they finished the wine. Sean marveled at Ava's beauty in the pale yellow light of the lamp. As he gazed at her, he could see the lamp's flame reflected in her eyes. He reached and caressed her face with the back of his hand, afraid to touch her beauty with his rough, calloused palms. They sat and stared at each other as a full moon rose. Their faces moved closer and closer until finally their lips met. The kiss started out as a light, friendly kiss, but quickly evolved into a hot, passion-filled kiss of long-lost lovers. Sean moved his hand up and ran his fingers through Ava's short, silky hair. He broke the kiss, still holding her head with his hand. Now he knew this feeling for what it was. Sean looked at Ava and said, "I love you." Ava heard the three little words, and her heart felt like it would explode. "I love you too, Sean." In her head she knew this was crazy, but in her heart she knew that Sean was the one. Now he had told her that he felt the same, and she was very, very happy. Things were going pretty fast, and Sean thought that he should slow down at least a little. The one thing that he was sure of right now was that he didn't want to do anything to jeopardize having a relationship with this beautiful woman. Sean looked at Ava and asked, "Would you like to go for a walk?" Ava, thinking that doing anything with Sean was all she would ever want to do, simply nodded her head. Sean stood up and offered her his hand. They walked out of the screened-in area of the summer kitchen and down the moon-lit road to the footbridge that his father and he had built over the spring-fed creek. When they got to the bridge, they stood in the middle of it and just held each other. It was close to midnight when the two lovers realized how late it had become. Still not rushing it, they walked hand in hand back to the ranch house. Once inside the house, Sean lit one of the many coal oil lamps. Then, picking up Ava's suitcase, he led her to the guest bedroom. "I hope this will be all right." Sean started. "Maria just cleaned it last week, and I've had it closed up since then. It's fine, though it looks like a boy's room." She commented. "Yeah, it was mine till my folks." Sean's voice faded and his eyes searched the floor for something to focus on. Simon had told Ava that Sean's parents had been killed in a car wreck. It was obvious that he